This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Caroline Bargout. Some gas stations around the city are starting to feel the pinch of the pipeline shutdown and intermittent fuel shortages. While there is more inventory on the way daily, the Premier had words for distributors. Be fair. CBC's Brittany Greenslade has more.
It's been less than a week since Imperial Oil shut down its pipeline to Winnipeg, and already some retailers are running dry.
It impacted anybody who gets in a car. It's what we got to live with now.
Several discount gas stations CBC visited Thursday morning were out of regular gas and only had premium for sale. Some were limiting fill-ups, while others were completely out and forced to close for the day.
I went there to have some pump in gasoline, and they just said me that we don't have the gasoline here.
Imperial Oil took its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg out of service after an inspection raised concerns of strain along one portion. It's expected to be out of commission for 3 months. Owners of Domo and 204 Fuels, where the shortages are occurring, did not respond to CBC's request Thursday. Larger retailers don't appear to be having the same issues.
What you're seeing right now is a result of market inefficiencies. And so that's why we've been telling the suppliers that they need to provide access to all of the distributors who then feed the gas stations.
The province says roughly 50,000 barrels are arriving in Winnipeg each day. And the Premier says he's been clear about his expectations to oil and gas companies.
But we also need to make sure that that supply is being distributed equitably across the different regions who need it, across the different sectors of the economy. We're heading into seeding season as well, but also to all the different retailers of fuel in our province.
Prices are increasing, with some stations jumping 12 cents since Monday. The government says it doesn't believe the rise is connected to the shutdown, but rather crude oil prices. But it's watching closely.
But furthermore, we continue to lean on and, quite frankly, push the suppliers to ensure that the affordability that we care about for when it comes to gas, and particularly given that we lowered the gas price by 14 cents a litre on January 1st, is something that the suppliers can deliver on.
The Premier says if gas prices continue to go up, the province could take further steps to keep gas affordable for Manitobans. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And speaking of the cost at the pumps, the Premier raised eyebrows today when he seemed to suggest the provincial gas tax may be lowered permanently. For more, we're joined by CBC's Ian Fraze. Ian, what exactly did the Premier say?
Well, it sounds like the provincial gas tax won't return to being 14 cents a litre. Premier Wab Kinew was responding to the PC's Abhi Khan during question period.
I'll never let the gas tax get as high as it was under his government.
Yeah, that's right. In case you just missed that, he's saying that he won't let the gas tax get as high as it was under the PC government. Obviously, this raised questions. Manitobans are scheduled to continue paying no gas tax until July. The gas tax holiday under the NDP government could be extended beyond that, but Kinew hasn't confirmed. His comments today, though, opened the door to a permanent break at the pumps, something he wouldn't confirm or deny afterwards.
Sometimes you say things in the back and forth of question period that just reflect, the moment that you're in. And other times you're offering sneak peeks at future government policies. So I guess time will tell which one this falls into. But I will say that on the general topic of helping Manitobans at the pump, we'll have an update in the budget on April 2nd.
Ian, earlier today, Kinew was in Lac du Bonny to announce a new personal care home that's going to be built. But haven't we heard that before?
Yeah, that's right. Since 2012, this home has been promised, cancelled, then promised again. But once the NDP took power, the project was put on hold while the government reviewed the funding of provincial projects. But today, the province announced a 95-bed home will be built. Lauren Schinkel-Reeve of the surrounding municipality says it's been a long time coming.
It's kind of ironic that Premier Selinger came here to our community, and that was the first sod turning.
You bet.
I wasn't there for that, but I have the shovel from the second one, Mr. Premier. But ironically, here we are 12 years later. And it seems rather fitting that Premier Canoe, Minister Asaguera, and your provincial team is here to pick up this announcement.
The NDP wouldn't discuss the status of other healthcare projects that are on hold. Canoe said the province cannot afford all of the PC's pre-election promises.
Ian, and finally, Families Minister Nahanni Fontaine says she's getting advice from people she trusts. Who's she talking about?
She's enlisted what she calls an amazing group of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals. The Matriarch Circle had its first meeting this morning. The unpaid group will guide the creation of Manitoba's first strategy around missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Fontaine says Indigenous voices have been missing in the legislature.
In the midst of an ongoing genocide against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited, it's a way to symbolically, in many ways, say that enough is enough. We're taking up our space. We're taking up our rightful place.
This 18-member circle will meet at least twice a year. Caroline.
Thanks, Ian. That's CBC's Ian Fraze reporting live from the newsroom. They may never know what happened in a small Interlake hospital nearly 70 years ago, but two men switched at birth in the 1950s received an apology at the Manitoba legislature today. It's the known third case in this province alone. Karen Pauls has more.
What happened to you cannot be undone, but it must be acknowledged and it must be atoned for.
An apology, years, decades in the making.
Richard Bouvet, I am sorry. Edward Ambrose, I am sorry.
Eddie Ambrose, now of Winnipeg, and Richard Beauvais of Seashelt, BC, were born on the same day at the Arberg Hospital in 1955. In 2022, they discovered through a DNA test that they'd been raised by each other's biological families.
There's a big trauma in there. There's a big emptiness in me.
Beauvais was raised in a Métis community and is a residential day school survivor who was taken from his family during the 60s scoop. Ambrose grew up Ukrainian, at one point living with a foster family. He recently got his Métis citizenship. The two men spoke about what it was like to meet for the first time this week.
It's emotional for meeting someone who is you, but I am him. It's a reverse.
We wondered which one was born first and who was older, but he's bald, so he's got to be older. That's it.
This isn't the first case of switched babies in Manitoba.
I just want to know what happened.
Two other sets of men from Northern First Nations found out they were switched at a federally run hospital in 1975.
You want answers? You want answers? I want answers.
Health Canada determined the switches were accidental. Still, Ottawa provided financial settlements and support services to the men and their families.
A mistake was made.
Their lawyer, Bill Gange, is now also negotiating with the province on behalf of Ambrose and Beauvais.
My hope is that we're going to be able to work out a compensation package.
Premier Wab Kinew didn't make any commitments, but
did tell them as part of the conversation today, we'll be there for the next steps.
The previous Conservative government said the province has no legal liability. It didn't offer an apology or compensation. Meanwhile, the statute of limitations for cases like this has long expired. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg City Council has approved a plan to reopen Portage and Main to pedestrians. The vote took place just a few minutes ago at a meeting that lasted all day, with councillors voting 11-3 in favour of the plan. As CBC's Cameron McLean reports, many questions have been left unanswered.
If all goes according to plan, these barricades will be gone by next summer. The plan for Portage and Main came to Council just weeks after a report said it would cost $73 million to replace the membrane protecting the underground concourse. At City Hall, few speakers opposed letting pedestrians cross the intersection. But many, like Judy Waychuk, questioned the speed at which the city was making the decision to shutter the concourse.
14 business days after announcing the closure of the concourse. 14 days?
Waychuk's husband, Bruce Head, designed this massive artwork in the underground. She wants the city to try to save it. There were also concerns about the impact the redesign could have on truck traffic. Aaron Dolinek represents the Manitoba Trucking Association.
The renderings that we've seen show a transit station on Portage Avenue East, and in the rendering there's no cars, there's no trucks, there's nothing else but transit on Portage Avenue East.
The city report estimates decommissioning the concourse could cost $20 to $50 million. Gillingham says he favors that plan, but more study is needed before work begins.
There's more conversation about what the intersection will look like that needs to happen. That's always been part of the motion and part of the plan.
One opponent of the plan, Councillor Jeff Brawadi, said he would vote for the mayor's motion if it was changed to explicitly call for a traffic study. Some other council members remained unconvinced. Ross Eady worried about the impacts on people with disabilities.
I'm not opposed to opening up Portage and Main, but I'm definitely not for closing the concourse. It's existing infrastructure.
Russ Wyatt says the city should have known repairing the concourse would carry a heavy cost.
We knew we were going to have to maintain that concourse. We knew we were going to have costs involved with maintaining the pipes under the road. None of that is a surprise.
The plan calls for the intersection to be opened by July 1st, 2025. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
One of Winnipeg's most popular attractions and places to meet will soon also become a place to live. A development project at the Forks that's been in the works for more than a decade is breaking ground this summer. CBC's Rosanna Hempel explains the changes coming its way.
You may be used to parking here to visit the Forks, but this parking lot between the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and the rail lines will look a lot different in 2 years. The Forks hopes to eventually welcome tenants here in apartment and condo buildings that are breaking ground this summer.
We are so excited about inviting people to live at the Forks with Railside at the Forks. It's going to be an instrumental change for the Forks. However, we're going to be really hanging on to being a mixed-use environment, being a place for people, a welcoming community.
Sarah Stasiak with the Forks North Portage announcing that Phase 1 of the Railside project will bring 10 buildings with a total of 337 suites.
Everything from teeny little studio units, micro suites, to ideally 3-bedroom units, attracting families.
The ground floor of each building will be business space open to the public. 7 developers will own and run the buildings, including the Forks itself, where Stasiak says they hope to have affordable rent-geared-to-income units.
And so we want to see if we can do something that is a little bit more accessible to members of our community.
It's exciting news for Kate Fensky with the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. She says downtown needs more connectivity and housing, which has limited vacancy right now.
One of the most important things when we're looking at what kind of downtown do we want for our future and how are we going to get more people here to create a more vibrant and safe neighborhood, it really is going to come down to residents.
As for visitors, Stasiak says the couple hundred lost parking spots aren't a concern amid the 2,000 available. Right now, the only hint of the project you'll see is 2 fire hydrants. But come summer, the construction fences will go up. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 2-week strike at a Winnipeg nonprofit agency that cares for people with disabilities appears to be almost over. The union representing 160 healthcare aides for 1010 Sinclair, who walked off the job earlier this month, says they have a tentative deal. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says the agreement will be voted on by members tomorrow. The strike has left 100 Winnipeggers who live with disabilities scrambling to get essential care. A British Columbia man who lost more than $700,000 in an investment fraud is thankful he was able to get his money back. He credits this to the actions taken in a Winnipeg fraud case that happened around the same time. The I-Team's Verilyn Kubinik reports.
A Vancouver man says he was devastated when he learned a fraudster had taken the money he sent by wire transfer to what he thought would be a safe investment for his business. Alan Landa operates 2 businesses in BC, one in real estate development and the other that sells arcade games all over Western Canada. In November 2022, he was searching for a placement for his investment money to get a good interest rate on it until he would need the money for his business. He got a phone call from someone identifying himself as an investment advisor with a bank. After several calls and emails, Landa decided to invest more than $735,000 through the man in what he thought would be safe investments. He sent the money in 2 wire transfers that went into a bank account of a company named B21 Trade Canada Limited. He later learned the person who contacted him was an imposter, fraudulently posing as an investment advisor at a bank.
I couldn't believe that I blew my nest egg. I just honestly, I wanted to curl up into a little ball and never be seen again.
Around the same time as Landa's fraud case, a similar case happened in Winnipeg to Peter Squire, who lost more than $600,000 in a fraud involving the same company, B21 Trade Canada. Landa was told the bank account was frozen, and he credits actions taken in the Winnipeg case for that.
Every phone call, every word spoken went through my head over and over again, and I kept going, well, that was a red flag. How did I miss that one? Oh my God, how did I fall for this?
When the bank account was frozen, the alleged fraudster could not remove the money, and Landa filed a lawsuit in BC Supreme Court. He succeeded in getting a court order to get his money back.
I would say fraud is very bad right now. I would say it's probably the worst it's ever been.
Sergeant Shiv Gill heads the Vancouver Police Department Financial Crime Unit. He thinks fraud increased during the pandemic when people did more business online.
It's devastating. So the people who are victimized, the emotional impact can be quite severe. They're embarrassed. They can't believe that they fell for this scam, so they have difficulty telling people. I've noticed actually they have difficulty reporting it to the police.
To help reduce the problem, Sergeant Gill says he'd like to see government change banking regulations so that banks and credit unions would be obligated to repay money to account holders if they lose funds through fraud. Vera Lynn Kubanek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk is here for the first look at weather. Okay. Blizzard coming to Toronto and sunshine in Winnipeg. I can get on board behind that.
Yeah, some snow headed to southern Ontario as we get into the day on Friday. But yeah, a totally different story here. We're looking at sunnier conditions, Caroline. And
finally.
Yeah. Next few days even looking quite sunny as well. Let's have a look at satellite radar right now. You can see a little bit of clouds starting to move into the southwest corner of the province as expected. So you can see here, I've kept the shot quite wide because you can see this along the bottom of your screen here, that Clipper system moving into Saskatchewan and then south into North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, not bringing us much here aside from some cloud cover overnight and maybe a few snowflakes in southwestern Manitoba, pardon me, as we get into the overnight period tonight. So overnight, still seeing some of that cloud cover, but it quickly exits by the time we get into Friday. So by Friday lunchtime, we're looking at mainly sunny skies once again. A few passing clouds still through extreme southern Manitoba. Otherwise, I don't have a lot to talk about tonight other than mainly sunny skies as we head through the weekend, through Saturday, into Sunday, mainly sunny skies as well. Bit of cloud builds in on Sunday. This ahead of maybe some snow as we head into Monday morning in flurries, I'm calling it, through Monday afternoon. Look at temperatures where we sit right now. -5 in Winnipeg, got up to -4.6 downtown this afternoon. -5 in Melita as well. Bit cooler to the north once again tonight, -18 in Lynn Lake and into the -20s through Tadouli Lake and in through Churchill. -5 right now in Winnipeg. Winds have really died off at 11 kilometers an hour right now. Pressure is falling at 102.6. So here's the setup that we have, big picture. You can see that cold air, that ridge of high pressure really stuck in northern Manitoba and northern Ontario, impacting Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and even down into southern Ontario, where, yes, some snow in the forecast as we get into Friday and lingering into Saturday morning. You can see that we really don't get much of a reprieve from this cooler air. It even sinks a little bit further south as we get into Monday and lingers into Tuesday. It's not till we get into the later part of next week that we start to see temperatures rising to something a little bit more seasonal for this time of the year. So partly cloudy, north winds tonight, a low of -12 in Winnipeg, -11 first thing in the morning. North winds at 10 once again, and we're looking at a mostly sunny afternoon once again tomorrow. Maybe a bit breezy at times, northwest winds at 20 as we get through the weekend. We're looking at sunny skies for both Saturday and Sunday with increasing clouds, -4 degrees. Late day flurries move through southern Manitoba Monday. Watch those gusty northeast winds to 50 and some lingering flurries into the morning on Tuesday, Caroline, with a high of -3 degrees. And once we get to the middle end of next week, we do start to see temperatures warming up to something more seasonal once again.
Okay, I can live with that. Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
For the first time ever, Canada will set targets for how many people are allowed into the country under temporary resident programs. We'll have more on the announcement made today and what it could mean for migrant workers after the break. The immigration minister announced today for the first time ever, Canada will set targets for how many people are allowed into the country under temporary resident programs. The goal is to reduce the number over the next 3 years. CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Canada, like many other countries, has become addicted to temporary foreign workers.
And it's high time to treat that addiction, the federal government says. Over the next 3 years, it intends to reduce the number of temporary foreign residents that make up Canada's population from 6.2% down to 5%, something the immigration minister wants to do carefully.
If you look in those large categories, there are ones that we don't control. For example, the humanitarian categories. We are just now starting to get some control over the student category, which is a very large part of that.
Something else Ottawa wants to do is lower the number of foreign workers a business can hire, though it will carve out exemptions for construction, healthcare, and agriculture sectors.
This also encourages employers to prioritize workers that are already here, able and willing to do those roles. As of May 1st, we are asking employers that after they consider and offer the job to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and refugees, that they also now prioritize recruiting asylum seekers.
Some observers of the Canadian economy say today's announcement may be about sending a message to employers.
In 2022, the government announced a very significant expansion of the temporary foreign worker program. And this is just simply telling employers across the country that's ending. This program is not expanding. We are beginning to push in a different direction.
But others say they do see an impact on housing availability.
If we think of there being 2 to 3 people per household, you're looking at a couple 100,000 homes. So this really will make a difference, because it also means that the non-permanent resident population isn't growing. And we've seen over the last year almost 1 million new non-permanent residents added to Canada's population.
The federal immigration minister says he wants to meet with his provincial and territorial counterparts in early May in order to receive their input on reducing the number of temporary residents before setting his targets. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal government has introduced a long-awaited legislation involving the Canadian Armed Forces. It plans to strip the military's power to investigate and prosecute alleged sexual crimes by its members and move sexual misconduct cases to the civilian justice system. CBC's Ashley Burke has the details.
Canada's defense minister had vowed to strip the military of a controversial power to investigate and prosecute sexual offences by its members. Now he's introduced legislation to do just that.
This legislation will definitively remove the Canadian Armed Forces jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute any criminal code sexual offence committed in Canada.
The move, a direct response to a key recommendation by retired Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour in 2022. She concluded the force's handling of sexual offense cases over the past 20 years was a systemic failure that eroded trust and morale, and they should only be handled in the civilian system.
In the pursuit of justice, we believe that the legislation that we've introduced today opens up new opportunities for victims to pursue justice, and it provides clarity and certainty on how to proceed.
To me, it's mission accomplished.
This military law expert has been calling for change for more than a decade. He's represented dozens of victims who say they've been failed by the military's justice system.
They never got justice. In some cases, years, decades after, they never got justice. And when they have it, it was tentative justice, not full justice.
That includes Master Corporal Stephanie Raymond, seen here at civilian court, where this former warrant officer was sentenced to jail time for sexually assaulting her a decade earlier. He was originally acquitted in the military's judicial system.
I wait to see the real actions. The first concern of the military police is to protect the reputation of the military. So this is not for protecting the public.
The minister's message for Raymond and other victims who called for change is this.
We've heard you, and we are responding. And I appreciate people would like us to go faster. We're going as fast as we possibly can, but we all feel an enormous sense of urgency to go get this job done.
If this bill passes, the military would have to hand over all of its ongoing sexual offense cases to civilian authorities within 60 days. One expert said they hope that happens by this fall. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Russia fired more than 24 missiles at Ukraine's capital today. But even as civilian areas get bombarded during the drawn-out invasion, the front lines are the focus of Kyiv's European allies this week. EU leaders are trying to see how frozen Russian assets can be used to help buy much-needed ammunition for Ukrainian fighters. Briar Stewart has that story.
This is the aftermath of the largest air attack on Ukraine's capital in weeks. Apartments still smoldering after more than 30 missiles were fired at the area. Ukraine says it shot down all of the missiles during a 3-hour air raid alert. Some weary residents waited it out underground at metro stations. At least 17 people were injured in the attack, many others severely traumatized. She is in shock, says this mother. It was literally as if she was being thrown up and down. It was horrible.
Ammunition.
The latest attack comes as Ukraine's president warns that its low ammunition supply is humiliating for all of Europe.
And I urge you to help to protect our cities.
In Brussels, EU leaders are discussing a plan on how to help Ukraine rearm and how to pay for it.
Es geht immer die windfall profits.
Germany's chancellor is talking about a plan by the European Commission to use the investment profits from Russia's central bank assets stored in the EU, which have been frozen since the start of the war. It's estimated that amounts to the equivalent of $300 billion Canadian, and that the profits could be upwards of $4 billion a year.
You need everybody on board to take these steps.
This Russian political expert says using the profits to buy weapons is a contentious issue for the bloc. And even if all the countries agree, it isn't going to make an immediate difference in Ukraine.
Whatever you use it for, it's going to take time. And of course, time is the issue here, both with this and with all of the other streams of funding that have been put on hold from the United States.
By that he means the $60 billion in military aid that's still held up in Congress. While the debate continues, there's no reprieve on the front line, nor for the residents whose homes were violently shattered in the middle of the night. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
People in Montreal are paying their respects to Brian Mulroney. The former Prime Minister lies in repose today at St. Patrick's Basilica. The Archbishop of Montreal led the procession into the church with family members walking behind. Dignitaries and members of the public greeted the Mulroneys throughout the day and will have another chance to do so tomorrow. The state funeral will take place Saturday at the Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal. There will be eulogies from Mulroney's daughter Caroline, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, and Wayne Gretzky. The CBC News special is on Saturday and begins at 9 a.m. Eastern. When you hear about efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you probably think about carbon emissions. But there's another type of greenhouse gas, methane, and the federal government is working to reduce those emissions too. We'll have more on how after the break. When talking about climate change, you hear a lot about the need to reduce carbon emissions. That's carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas produced in Canada. But there are other types of greenhouse gases, including methane. And the federal government is working on strategies to reduce those emissions too. CBC's Shayna Luck rode along with the team helping Environment Canada.
This is what a plume looks like. See?
Nadia Taraki and her team have spent a lot of time bumping slowly across Canadian landfills. They're using many types of equipment to find methane leaks. The invisible, odorless gas is a big problem for climate change, at least 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide and caused by the breakdown of organic material.
And we told the operators, and then they fixed that one because they also wanted to keep down their emissions from the landfill as well.
Right now, Canada wants to regulate landfill methane, but it only has estimates of methane emissions. It doesn't have exact measurements. This university research team's work is being shared with Environment Canada. Dave Risk is their team leader.
If we're going to regulate, we need to be starting in the right place, and if people, landfill operators will be spending money on mitigation and installing capture systems, then we need to know that their investments are for the right reasons and will make a difference.
The same landfill outside Halifax in the 1970s. Landfills are held to higher standards now, but the decomposing organic waste will create methane for decades to come.
And this landfill is still emitting, and it's been closed for 25 years, and it will keep emitting for probably another 75 years.
Some modern landfills capture methane and burn it off. Some even generate electricity from that burn, putting trash back to good use.
It's one of the potentially easy wins.
But this climate policy expert notes not all landfills choose to do that. She says regulation could make a difference.
It's fairly simple. Let's put in a gas capture system, let's monitor, and let's prioritize capture for use.
The federal government's regulations on landfill methane are due to be published later this year. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
A UN report says electronic waste around the world is piling up, and not enough is being done to reduce or recycle.
The rate at which the e-waste mountain is growing is 5 times faster than the rate at which a global recycling is, growing. So with this, current trend, we are simply losing the battle against e-waste.
Experts blame the mounting problem on high consumption, limited repair options, and lack of proper recycling facilities. The report says the year 2022 saw more than 600 million kilograms of electronic waste, enough to fill trucks lined up bumper to bumper around the world. Metals make up almost half of the total weight of what's thrown away. But e-waste can also contain substances such as mercury, which pose environmental and health hazards, especially when rain causes toxins from landfills to contaminate fresh water nearby. CBC weather specialist Riley Laychuk is here. Hi, Riley.
I just wanted to note
Good to
that
see you.
Caroline has made a huge mess on the desk.
I was going to say, there's a recycling bin. I tossed my papers. I'm
going to slip on one
today.
of these. Yeah, well, some parts of the country, Caroline, are seeing some pretty wild weather, which we'll talk about. But, dog walking forecast, it's going to be...
I love this.
She loves this segment.
This is my favorite. And when Janet returns next week, I feel like you should continue this.
Yes, we'll definitely continue it. Tonight I have some pictures to show you of a cat and a dog.
Oh.
So let's get right into it. This is... these are Nash and Toby, courtesy of Holly. I don't think Nash particularly likes going outside, but I'm sure Toby will enjoy the weather tomorrow morning. Sunny and minus 11 for that morning walk, and warming up to about minus 6 by the time we hit the later afternoon. So pretty decent day ahead, if you ask me, if you like the sunshine at least. Wanted to show you Southern Ontario because I know we did talk about some wild weather headed towards Southern Ontario. So this takes us out through Friday. I'm noting this in particular because this could impact travel plans if you have any travel plans that involve flying into or out of Toronto's airport. So by the time we get into Friday, supper time, well into some snow and some fairly windy conditions through southern Ontario. And we're not just talking like a little dusting of snow here. We're talking about a general 10 to 15 centimeters by the time we hit Saturday across southern Ontario. So yes, could impact some travel if you are traveling to or from or out of southern Ontario, or if you know someone who is. So closer to home, -5 at the airport, -4 at the Forks, and we're seeing temperatures right around that -5 mark generally across southern Manitoba. Bit warmer along the international border, -3s for Emerson as well as for Morden Winkler. Barons River at -11 degrees, as well as Norway House and Flin Flon. Bit cooler to the north, -22 along the Hudson Bay coast in Churchill, and Gillam at -19. So looking at your forecast for tonight, you can see the satellite imagery here with some of that cloud cover that is starting to move into parts of southwestern Manitoba. We'll start to see a little bit of cloud cover build into southern Manitoba this evening. So a mainly cloudy evening tonight for the southwest. Looking at temperatures around -14, -15 for Brandon and Verdon. Partly cloudy through the Red River Valley, a bit cooler along the water through Gimli at -17 degrees, and temperatures again in northern Manitoba bordering that -30 mark. So another cold night across northern Manitoba, waking up tomorrow around -20 for Flin Flon and the Pas. Mainly sunny for tomorrow. A chance of flurries along the Hudson Bay coast, fairly scattered flurries, if that, and temperatures at around -14 in both Thompson and Norway House by the time we hit noon, -16 in Island Lake. Starting a little bit on the cloudier side across parts of southern Manitoba tomorrow, -13 first thing in the morning for Brandon. By the time we hit noon, most of that cloud clears out, so we're back to a mainly sunny sky for the afternoon at least, looking at -10s for both Winnipeg and Brandon, -7s and -8s along the international border, -6s by the time we hit the afternoon for Emerson and Winnipeg. Steinbach at -7 degrees. And Caroline looking at mainly sunny skies, and that will continue through Saturday as well, and the details are coming up in your 7-day forecast.
Awesome. Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Manitoba researchers have received nearly $4 million in provincial and federal government grants to study women's heart health, which is the leading cause of death in women after cancer. We spoke to the lead doctor heading this project, and we'll have more on that after the break. The Rady Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba has received a $3.9 million government grant to study women's heart health, which has historically been understudied. The 10-person research team is led by Dr. Laurie Kirschenbaum. I spoke with him earlier today and got a tour of some of his research facilities. Here's part of our conversation. Dr. Kirschenbaum, heart disease is the #1 killer of men, also the #1 killer of women next to cancer. Can you talk about what you're doing to maybe bridge that gap or to study more about why?
Right, thanks very much. Yes, next to cancer, heart disease is the #1 killer of women. And the reason for that is that women have been understudied with respect to research, with respect to clinical trials, and there's this gap in the way we address women living with heart disease. And consequently, this major funding, the Canada Foundation for Innovation, will help us address this gap in differences between men and women with respect to heart disease. Particularly, we're interested in looking at changes in how metabolism affect sex, both in males and females, and this infrastructure grant will help our team look at a whole gamut of reasons why heart disease is so prevalent and understudied in women.
So when you look at a picture of the anatomy, for example, the heart looks the same in women and men. So how different is it in both?
So it's interesting because the hearts are quite different. Next to the reproductive system, hearts of men and women are quite different. Women develop different kinds of heart disease. They manifest heart disease symptoms much differently than men, and for this reason they are often misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. Our goal is to really understand why that is and to help provide better patient care through research that will translate into better quality of life for both men and women, but the focus on women.
So how will this money go towards studying women's heart health?
So the grant will allow us to purchase equipment that we otherwise wouldn't have in Manitoba. It's a really exciting opportunity because the Institute of Cardiovascular Sciences at St. Boniface Albertson Research Center is partnered with the University of Manitoba and several different departments throughout the university, including engineering, functional foods, I guess, in fact, many areas, including clinical cardiology. And all these experts come together to focus on this one problem, which makes us very unique. So the infrastructure, buying this equipment, is paramount to us moving forward. We wouldn't otherwise have this great opportunity for these experts to come together and solve this problem.
So could the research that you are doing to study women's heart health, how could this be applied in the future to help women and to maybe help women survive heart attacks or heart issues?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the major themes. Our goal is to try and develop new biomarkers or understand the mechanisms of why heart disease occurs differently in males and females. And the goal is to develop better treatments, better education, and more importantly also to address the concern of not understanding when women are having heart disease. So this is awareness, and so part of this is an education component. There's also a mental illness component tied to this as well, because the idea of having heart disease, especially if it's a caregiver, mom, aunt, whoever, our sisters, brothers, daughters who have heart disease, we have to understand that they may be providing care for a family, and there's a mental stress associated with any disease, but in particular heart disease. Mm-hmm. With women heart health, or the other area that we study, the concern is that many individuals who are undergoing chemotherapy for cancer treatment, they're given various drugs, and the drugs are very effective in treating the cancer, but one of the side effects is it causes heart muscle damage. And because women are treated for ovarian cancer and breast cancer, again, they're very susceptible to this sort of what we call a cardiomyopathy that ultimately leads to heart failure. And so one of the areas that we and some of our team are interested in studying is why that occurs, so we could prevent the heart muscle damage from occurring, yet allow the cancer therapy to occur and help treat the person. Sometimes what happens is that the heart muscle becomes weakened and the person has to stop the cancer therapy.
Before we wrap up, can you talk a little bit about how it presents itself differently in men and women and some of the signs that people can look out for?
You know, it's a really interesting question because typically men will manifest radiating pain in their arm, very difficult breathing, heaviness on their chest. Women typically do get some of those symptoms, but not always. They may be as simple as feeling unwell or exceptionally tired. Vague symptoms that are often dismissed as anxiety or really non-specific, in contrast to the classical, heart attack type symptoms. So my recommendation is, if you're feeling unwell and you don't feel right, just that sort of feeling, visit your doctor, call 911, get help immediately.
And that is Dr. Laurie Kirschenbaum. He is leading a team of 10 researchers who are using a $3.9 million provincial and federal government grant to study women's heart health. Still ahead, Riley Leitchuk is back with our last check on your forecast. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Here's a look at your day planner for your Friday, looking at a mainly sunny start to your day. Tomorrow, -11, we'll start to see some of that cloud that builds in overnight, pushing out as we get into the morning hours to a sunny afternoon tomorrow, -10 by noon and -6 by the afternoon. Could see a little bit of a breeze tomorrow with those northwest winds at 20. We see clouds building in for Sunday with late day flurries, early morning flurries through Monday, Tuesday, a little bit windy. And then we're back to sunny skies for Wednesday, Thursday, and temperature of 1 on Thursday, which is a bit closer to seasonal for this time of the year. Well, after 2 years and 4 failed attempts, a ragdoll cat that belonged to a woman in Kelowna, BC has successfully been cloned.
Yep, you heard that right. Chris Stewart received not 1, but 2 kittens cloned by a Texas company using DNA from her beloved cat, Bear, who died in a traffic accident 2 years ago.
Her 2 cloned kittens are tonight's Daily Lift.
Hi, sweetheart. You're actually coming to me. Oh, that's unusual.
Out of the two, I mean, if you could compare them, how much are these 2 kittens like Bear?
Right now, they both seem like Bear. Bear was full of, well, I've described him as bold, sassy, bitchy. And these guys are bold and sassy. Bear was mostly crabby when he wouldn't be allowed outside. And I actually wound up in emerge and urgent care on 4 different occasions with Bear because if he was outside and I picked him up to bring him inside and he did not want to come inside, he would bite me. Apparently 75% of animals' personality is carried on their genes, and these are 100% Bear. They're his genetically identical twins, sweetheart. I don't know. Bear was very rambunctious, and these guys are full of spit and vinegar.
I don't even know what to say. I guess, at least she didn't get them stuffed.
I would have I would have liked to have seen a picture of Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not a crazy cat lady at all. Have a good night. See you
Bye.
tomorrow.